This Friday, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back to switch things up in Disney's Freakier Friday.
Totally, yes.
It's an absolute riot.
Woo!
And the only movie that can be described as...
So much weirder than the last time. What last time?
It's the frequel.
You ready?
We've been waiting for.
That absolutely slays.
What deeply out-of-touch old person came up with that?
You did.
Wow.
Don't miss the comedy event of the summer for all ages. Disney's Freakier Friday. In theaters this Friday. Get tickets now. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested.
It's Wednesday Addams. I see you're trying to distract yourself from your own banal thoughts. Let me help. Here's a recording thing made of my latest root canal.
Wednesday, Season 2, begins August 6th, only on Netflix.
It's back to school season, and Clorox is donating 2 million disinfecting wipes to classrooms across America. Because back to school means things can get a little bit messy. Just ask kindergarten teacher Miss Gibson.
Give me just one Clorox wipe and I'm ready for glitter glue, exploded lunchbox yogurt, peanut butter handprints, runny noses, picking noses, rubbing noses.
Touching noses.
Thank you, Edward. Ooh, nap mats and lockers and tissue boxes. And
Clorox
scissors.
disinfecting wipes. Teacher's #1 wipe. Clean feels good. Based on unit sales data.
Pie in the Sky Media. This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence throughout. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to the Murder Chronicles. I'm your host, Carolyn Osorio. You're listening to episode 50. What happened to Sherri Rasmussen? The Rasmussens were a very tight family. Nels and Loretta had 3 daughters.
Connie is the oldest. Sherri was the middle. I am the baby. Connie is 7 years older than I am. Sherri was 4 years. I'm the baby.
That's Teresa. She's the baby. You'll also be hearing from big sister Connie throughout this episode.
I was born when my dad was in college, and then Sherri was also born when my parents were in college, and then Teresa was born when they finished dental school.
Connie, Sherri, and Teresa grew up in Arizona in the 1960s. Their dad was a dentist, and their mom was in charge of running the practice.
Family was really close, did a lot of stuff together. We'd go camping, picnicking, just a lot of adventures. We went to Apache Lake in Arizona forever. I learned how to ski when I was 3 years old. My sisters would ski, and they would sort of have a contest with the boys around the lake, and my sisters would beat them. I was too little to beat them, but they could out-ski all the boys at the lake, and so it was just good times.
Teresa says that even though they grew up in the 60s, her dad was extremely progressive when it came to his girls. It was important to him that his daughters believed in themselves.
My dad always wanted us to believe in ourselves as females, that we could achieve anything. It didn't matter if we were female or male, but females could do as good as males. So we have a strong will, all of us, to succeed and not be intimidated by politics or sexuality in the workplace. With his daughters, he wanted us to be self-sufficient and not have to rely on anybody but our own independence and be able to contribute to a relationship or whatever in our future. So when I was in high school, being self-confident was a little difficult with boys because they were better and whatnot, and I didn't believe that.
In a very tight-knit, loving family, Teresa says everyone had their unique qualities, and that Sherri, the middle child, was beloved and exceptional.
She was the glue to our family. She made all our personalities that mesh. She was able to see everybody's point of view and help us see the other person's point of view so there wouldn't be conflict or anything like that. I guess the peacekeeper or something like that. I don't really think she had to keep the peace, but I mean, she was just the center of our family.
The Rasmussens' girls had grown into successful, confident young women, and they all remained very close. At the age of 29, Sherri was the director of critical care at Glendale Adventist Medical Center. She was the type of nurse who never gave up on people.
She had a young boy that had been in a dune buggy accident on life support and stuff, and they didn't know if he was going to make it. And my sister would come home and talk that she would sit and talk to him and try to make things better and give him hope, because they say they always can hear. And you could see how much it affected her life and how she felt about things. And then I also lived with her when she was getting her master's, when she was working at UCLA. She would talk about doing CPR on a gentleman for I don't know how long, but she was so tired. And after that weekend, her muscles were so sore from continually trying to revive this guy. She always gave herself 100% to whatever she did.
In June of 1984, Sherri met John Rutten, who was an engineer, and from the beginning, they were immediately drawn to each other.
Friend had the party, but Sherri was there, and John saw Sherri across the room and thought, oh my gosh, she's just amazing, and went and talked to her, and that they started dating that night.
In May of 1985, they would become engaged.
He adored her. My sister would dote over him as well. They were together, and I trusted my sister and with my own life, and I trusted her that she knew what she was doing and marrying this guy, and she loved him, and so that's all I needed to know. She loved him. He was part of the family. I loved him.
But according to Connie, Sherri and Teresa's big sister, their parents were concerned about John. They didn't approve of John's engagement gift. A BMW was extravagant in their eyes.
I think they liked John. There were things that were starting to red flags for my dad, like he bought the BMW for Sherri, but it was, on time, so you had to make payments, and my dad was concerned about, him spending so much money, and Sherri was very frugal, so that, she manage her money so that she could buy the condo and those kind of things. And he was worried that this might be a bad direction that John was taking them in.
And there was the issue of another woman. Apparently, after their engagement, John's ex showed up at the hospital where Sherri worked and confronted her. It was very aggressive. She threatened Sherri. She told her that she and John had had sex after they were engaged. And she would say, if I can't have John, then nobody else will.
Confronted Sherri about her relationship with John and not wanting, Sherri, interfering but making a lot of accusations and high volume voice and stuff. So,
distraught, Sherri came home from work that night and confronted John, who would ultimately confess to having sex with his ex after he and Sherri had become engaged. John promised then not to have any more contact with his former girlfriend. Sherri forgave him, and the couple moved forward in their relationship, marrying in November of 1985. Even though some of Sherri's family members had reservations about John, they trusted Sherri implicitly. So when the couple were married, Big Sister Connie says she was happy for her sister.
Sherri loved being an aunt. She carried Rachel around most of the time during her wedding reception, and people thought maybe that was her baby. But she was really loved her new niece. So
well, and it sounds like she was able to just one glance at your sister say you're pregnant, like before she even told her.
Yeah.
She was really keyed into people, it sounds like.
She was compassionate, funny, intuitive, smart. She was just a beautiful person inside and out. She was very athletic. She always was the athletic one and always kind of got us all involved in doing sports.
But the issue of John's ex after the marriage persisted. the woman wouldn't accept that John had moved on.
I had feelings for John because she'd come to her work. She had come by their condo to have John put wax on her snow skis and was making inappropriate visits to their environment.
Sometime in January 1986, Sherri would confide to her father that she believed John's ex was stalking her. She was worried. But she asked her father to let her handle it.
Dad took seriously his responsibility of providing and protecting his family. And, even though he and Sherri had talked about it, she asked him to let her handle it. And he respected her, her request. And I think he felt responsible for not, stepping in.
For a father who had raised such strong, capable women, he was conflicted. But he honored his daughter's request. But oh, how he would come to regret that.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, onabotulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Comcast is committed to bringing access to the internet to all Americans, including rural communities across the country, like Sussex County, Delaware.
We were being left behind. Everybody around us seemed to have internet, but we did not. High-speed internet is one of those good things that we needed to help us move our farming, our small businesses, our recreation forward.
Learn more about how we're bringing our next-generation network to more people across the country at ComcastCorporation.com/investment in America.
On February 23, 1986, Teresa was so excited to hang out with her sister and her new husband, John. At the time, she was 6 months pregnant.
Sherri lived in San Fernando Valley. I was in Loma Linda. My husband was going to dental school. And so we would see each other quite often, I feel, talk to each other all the time. And we went down there because my husband wanted to go to a saltwater fish store in San Fernando Valley. We went down there and Sherri had gotten her new car from John. And so we took it for a drive and went down to the fish store.
The following morning, on February 24th, John got up and left for work at around 7:20. Meanwhile, Sherri called in sick. She wasn't feeling well. Teresa called Sherri at around 10 a.m. that morning, but she didn't pick up.
I called her work, and her secretary said that she had stayed home and she was sick. And I said, okay, I'll call her at home. So I called her at home, and there was no answer. I didn't think anything of it, that she didn't answer the phone. I left a message.
That morning, one of their condo neighbors would notice at around 9:45 that Sherri and John's garage door was open and that both of their vehicles were gone.
Later that day, before I went home from work, I called my mother and asked my mom if she had talked to Sherri, because she always called home, we were all in contact with each other quite a bit. I called Mom and asked her if she'd heard from Sherri, and she said no. And I went, okay. I tried to call her too, and sort of put it out of my mind. She's a grown girl and busy, so I didn't think much of it.
That evening, it was around 6 o'clock when John pulled up. He was surprised when he saw that the garage door was wide open, that Sherri's BMW was gone. He noticed broken glass on the driveway. It appeared to be from a shattered sliding glass patio door. He went through the garage, through the door that led into the condo, and saw that it was open too, which was upsetting because he had closed and locked it when he had left that morning. When John walked inside, he saw Sherri lying on the living room floor. She was still dressed in the shirt she'd slept in the night before and was wearing a robe, but she was dead. Sherri's cause of death was 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. Investigators would also find 2 bullet holes in the curtains covering the shattered sliding glass door, which indicated that 2 additional bullets had been fired. Strong evidence that the killer had gotten inside without forcing entry. Sherri hadn't just been shot to death 3 times. She'd also been brutally beaten. She had abrasions running up and down her arms, and near her wrists, there were injuries which were consistent with being tied with a rope or a cord. It was clear that Sherri had put up quite a fight. She had multiple contusions, an injury to her face which was consistent with being pistol whipped with the muzzle of a gun. The size and configuration of that gun matched a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson. There was also a blow to her head that matched a broken vase near her body. Sherri had lacerations and abrasions on her hands, mouth, face, head, and neck. Crime scene investigators would find 2 broken pieces of Sherri's fingernails by the front door. They would also find a white cord with bloodstains that matched Sherri's. On Sherri's left inner forearm, there was a bite mark. The pathologist would examine the bite mark under a microscope and determine that it had been inflicted at or about the time of Sherri's death. They also collected a quilt found near Sherri's body. It's believed that whoever had murdered Sherri had wrapped the quilt around the muzzle of the gun, using the blanket as a makeshift silencer. Samples were taken from the bite mark on Sherri's arm. The broken fingernails were collected, as well as clippings from other fingernails. In the living room, stereo equipment had been taken from the cabinet and was stacked by the door to the garage. A drawer in the living room had been yanked out, and its contents were dumped on the floor. But the other rooms had been left undisturbed. Reading the crime scene, investigators wondered if Sherri had been the victim of a burglary gone wrong. As they interpreted the crime scene, a theory began to coalesce that 2 thieves had come through an open door. There was no sign of forced entry. The burglars believed that no one was home, so they began collecting stereo equipment in the living room and rifling through drawers for valuables. But they didn't realize that Sherri had stayed home sick from work. And so when Sherri heard the noise from the bedroom, she walked in on the burglary happening in the living room. They theorized that the burglars tried to subdue Sherri, but at some point there was a struggle, and they shot Sherri. But there was a problem with this theory. There was no evidence of forced entry, and though the stereo equipment appeared to be stacked and ready to be taken, the only thing that was actually stolen was Sherri's BMW and Sherri and John's marriage certificate.
The marriage license and the car.
There was nothing else that was stolen.
Nope. The house was just staged, things were moved around, but none of her jewelry, she didn't have a lot of expensive jewelry. It was more costume jewelry, but but she had TVs and stereos and the typical things that you'd have in a house, and none of that was taken.
Connie says that she called Sherri that night, having no idea that her sister had been murdered and that Sherri and John's condo was now a crime scene.
I had called her from work, and then I had also called her that evening. And apparently one of the detectives or police officers answered the phone. And I thought, I knew it wasn't John's voice I was talking to. I said, I must have dialed the wrong number. And then I had to take care of my daughter, who had an ear infection at the time and didn't call back.
It wasn't until after midnight that she was made aware that her sister had been murdered. You get a call from your parents? I mean, what did that do to you?
Well, I was in shock. At first, I thought my dad was I said, that is a bad joke. And he goes, it's no joke. And then I just, started screaming and crying. And he sternly told me to pull it together. And so I pulled it together, and I said, okay, well, I'll make arrangements to fly down to L.A.
Sherri's other sister, Teresa, remember, she's the one that lived in California, says she got a phone call in the middle of the night from her father, too.
In the middle of the night, my dad called and said that Sherri had been killed. And I sat up in the bed and screamed. And I handed the phone to my husband, and he goes, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I couldn't say anything. So then my husband took the phone, and then my dad told my husband. And I guess we must have chatted a little bit what was going to happen the next day, or if they called me back later, I'm not quite sure. It's sort of a blur.
Teresa would meet her parents, sister Connie, and her 6-month-old at the airport. And here's where family dynamics come into play. Remember, Teresa, she lived in California and had come to love John because she'd spent time with him and Sherri.
I love John. He was fantastic. He loved Sherri to death. I have no qualms with John. I actually talked to him last week.
Whereas Connie says that she and her parents hadn't had a lot of interaction with John because they didn't live nearby. After Sherri's murder, they wanted answers. And Connie says her parents didn't feel like John was being as forthcoming as he could be.
His actions did not reflect what I would expect of a husband that loved his wife. And so he really sold my sister short, in my opinion. You know, when he found Sherri, it was around 5:30, 6 o'clock. My parents didn't hear about it till like 11:30 or 11:30, close to midnight. Because they didn't want my parents to be showing up, too soon.
Why would he want to keep that from them?
Because he called his parents right away so his dad would up there to protect him. He implied that my dad, might be confrontational. So he set my parents up for not being able to get there until the next day.
Of course, John was interviewed right away by police. And they would interview him into the next day. He was given a polygraph and he passed. But at some point in those interviews, he would tell detectives about his ex-girlfriend and that she was an LAPD officer. But according to Connie, John never told her parents the name of the ex. It's unclear if John's ex was ever interviewed by police. I reached out to the LAPD to get a clarification on this point, but haven't received a response to my interview request. Ultimately, John would be cleared as a suspect. The working theory by those investigators was that Sherri was a victim of a burglary gone wrong.
I think my dad had always thought that there was something else involved in just a random thing. He had just seen her, I think, Valentine's Day, and I think she died on the 20-something. I forget exactly the day. But, so I think that was pretty clear in Dad's mind at that point, so he didn't think it was a random act.
Especially after they had access to Sherri's condo. They thought it looked staged. Of course they were suspicious. Sherri had confided to her father that she was being followed, stalked. Sherri's father shared with police his suspicions that the former girlfriend of their daughter's husband, whose name they didn't know, had murdered Sherri. But their concerns appeared to fall on deaf ears. Detectives held fast with their theory that Sherri's killers were 2 unknown male Hispanics who were suspected of several burglaries in the area. A few days after Sherri's murder, 2 men described as Hispanic between 5'4" and 5'6" had robbed a woman in the neighborhood at gunpoint. Then, a few months after her murder, men with this description robbed another woman at gunpoint after she walked into a break-in while it was happening. Her house was just a few blocks from Sherri's, which put these men in the frame as the primary suspects in Sherri's murder.
My sense, and every time that I've had interaction with the detectives early on, was they were fixated on that it was a robbery, and even though we asked them several times to explore it, investigate it, did not concur. They said, that they just kind of blew us off.
Sherri's family was beyond upset, especially after they got a copy of Sherri's autopsy report. They believed in their hearts there was no way this was a robbery gone wrong. The crimes against Sherri, the beating she endured, was up close and personal.
Making arrangements for her funeral, we couldn't even go into her house to get something to bury her in. We had to go and buy something new. And they told my parents that she was so beat up that, not to see her. So we had to have a closed casket funeral.
Dad was very adamant in believing that it was this police woman who he didn't know what her name.
Right. I think, Sherri and John had been over to see my parents, and Sherri had talked to my dad. And so that's why my dad kept asking me if they had talked to the police officer. And they would say, no, she's not involved or whatever. And because that was the only thing that he knew that was a possibility otherwise than being somebody random that came in. But the thing of it is the more we heard the details of what, my dad got a hold of the autopsy, which they were not happy about, but we got the copy of the autopsy, and that was, I think we got that in the first couple of weeks after we were back home.
Who wasn't happy about that?
The LAPD.
Why were they not happy about that?
I don't know. I'm assuming that we were getting too much information and then asking more questions, and questions they didn't want to answer. I don't know. But
how did they express that they weren't? Do you recall, or did your dad tell you how they expressed?
They said, "Well, how did you get that?" Like it's a secret.
10 days after Sherri's murder, her BMW was recovered 2.5 miles from her home. The keys were in the ignition. It wasn't stripped or damaged.
Sherri was very tall, and the car seat, or the seat, was way forward. So it was a shorter person that drove the car out of my sister's garage.
Remember, the alleged suspects had been described as being between 5'4" and 5'6", which was circumstantial evidence to support investigators' theory that Sherri's murder was a burglary gone wrong.
A year after Sherri was killed, we held a press conference, and my dad offered a reward and everything, and then the detectives came up with this sketches that they thought it was burglars and so on and so on. And so nothing really came out about that. My dad wrote the chief of police. I forget what his name was back then. A real famous guy, but anyway, can't think of it.
Daryl Gates?
Yeah, him. He wrote Daryl Gates about my sister's death and kept a copy of the letter. And Gates said he never got it. So, I don't know. The police department wasn't very helpful.
As the years rolled on, the family never stopped trying to get investigators to listen to them. But they felt rebuffed in every effort to have them investigate the ex-girlfriend. According to the family, their concerns were dismissed. The detectives would tell Sherri's father to stop watching so much TV.
Well, my dad would be working and he'd say, "Call the detectives," and my mom would place the call. So they didn't do anything without one another.
Now, when we talked about that, it was such a, sometimes it's the simplest details that can really say everything. And when you described that your mom had weathered that card because she'd handled it so many times.
Yeah, well, it was frayed. It was, business cards are pretty sturdy, but that paper was just, it was soft. It was no longer hard. The edges were rounded, and the lettering was starting to rub off because it had been handled so many times.
And when I talked to your sister, she got really emotional about the part where, many parts, but like your dad was never the same in the sense that she felt that he had failed to protect his daughter.
Yeah, that was a burden that he carried for his life. And I think that this whole incident, it shortened both of my parents' lives. The amount of stress that they both carried as a result of Sherri's murder.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast, brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today, available now on all major podcast platforms.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
By 1998, the family had all but given up hope that Sherri's murder would ever be solved. But in December 2004, members of the LAPD's cold case unit reopened Sherri's case. But by then, a lot of the physical evidence was gone.
The only evidence that wasn't lost was the bite mark. Everything else in the whole box of evidence was lost.
Remember, Sherri had been bitten by her murderer. Swabs had been taken from that bite mark, and a pathologist had looked at the evidence under a microscope, which meant the slides could still be at the coroner's office. Investigators made a request to the coroner's office, hoping to find the bite mark tissue sample. The request wasn't in vain. The sample had been in a freezer in the coroner's evidence room since 1986. Back then, DNA was in its infancy. In 2005, a criminalist would examine a piece of one of the swabs under a microscope and perform DNA testing on it. 2 profiles were revealed, a major one and a minor one. The minor profile was believed to belong to Sherri, although there wasn't enough to get a complete match. The major one, however, was complete. And although they didn't know who it was based on the profile, they knew it was female. The killer was a woman, and quite possibly the robbery had been staged all along. They would upload the DNA profile into CODIS, but there wasn't a match. In 2009, investigators started looking into specific women who might have had a reason to murder Sherri. They went back to John, Sherri's former husband. They had re-interviewed John so many years later.
Uh-huh.
And that's maybe when her name got brought up again, the ex.
Yeah.
Because that's when they found out that the DNA was female, and so it totally discredited the 2 Hispanic men who were believed to be the burglars in a burglary gone wrong.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Teresa says that she got a call from her parents saying that the police wanted her to give a DNA sample for elimination purposes. A week later, she was contacted by the police again.
And they said they're going to be making an arrest soon. And so my dad was trying to get them to tell him who and get more information on what they had evidence-wise and whatnot, since they were going to be making the arrest. But they wouldn't tell him anything until the arrest was actually complete.
John's ex-girlfriend's name was Stephanie Lazarus. And now, with all the other women in Sherri's life eliminated, Lazarus was their number 1 suspect. It had been 23 years since Sherri was brutally murdered. By 2009, Stephanie Lazarus had gone on to have a successful career in law enforcement. She was a 25-year veteran of the Los Angeles Police Department, highly decorated and well-respected. She was a detective who worked high-end art thefts in LA, a very high-profile position. Unbeknownst to Detective Lazarus, cold case detective John Nettle had been assigned to the case, and when the unit realized a fellow officer was a suspect, they had to be very careful investigating one of their own. Did they get a surreptitious sample from her?
They did. They followed her and picked up a soda cup that she had disposed of when she was at Costco.
Wow, they didn't even do it at work.
No.
They really wanted to keep this
low profile.
Stephanie Lazarus's DNA was a match for the bite mark. They would also find her DNA under Sherri's fingernail. It was time to interview Stephanie, but investigators realized it was a very delicate situation they were presented with. They knew they had to be careful when they talked to Stephanie. Number 1, officers carry guns on them, even if they're at their desks at the station. So they concocted a ruse to get her into an interrogation room, because that way they could disarm her of her service weapon. The detectives explained to Stephanie that they needed her expertise on an art theft investigation. They asked her if she would join them in an actual interrogation room. In this way, they got her away from her gun, and they were also able to record the interview at the station on June 5th, 2009.
We've been assigned a case that we've been looking at. Okay. It's a new case, and reviewing the case, there's some notes to see as far as your name being mentioned. Do you know John Rutan?
When asked about John, Stephanie would repeat his name twice, as if trying to recall who he was. And they purposely referred to him as John Rutan, when they knew all along that his name was John Rutten.
John Rutten?
Rutten.
Oh, yeah, I went to school with him.
You did?
Yeah.
How long did you know him?
Gosh, I went to school in, went to UCLA in 1978. I started and, met him at school at the dorms.
Mm-hmm. Were you guys friends, close friends?
Yeah, we're very close friends.
Yeah?
I mean, what's this all about?
Well, it's a case we're working on, and it involves John, and in there, some of the statements we reviewed, there's notes and stuff that he knew you and stuff.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we were good friends, lived in the dorms for 2 years.
You guys lived in the same dorm?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Dykstra.
Okay. Were you guys just friends or anything else, or?
Yeah, we were good friends.
Yeah. Was there ever any relationship or anything that developed between you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we dated, I mean, what's this all about?
Well, it's relating to his wife.
Okay.
Okay. Did you know her?
Not really. I mean, I knew that he got married years ago.
Did you ever meet her?
God, I don't know.
Do you know who she was or anything?
Well, let me think. God, it's been a long time ago. I may have met her. Geez.
The interview was something that they had spent a lot of time preparing for. At first, she's like, oh yeah, I went to school with him. Then she tries to distance herself from him, act like he was just a close friend, even though they had dated in college and probably after. She was clearly evasive.
And let me ask you said you dated John. How long did you guys date?
I mean, are you guys, is this something, I mean, you said I was going to interview somebody about art and how you guys are, I mean.
Stephanie, here's the situation. It's basically, we knew that this, when we saw this in this chrono, that maybe, there was some relationship there. That's what the chrono seemed to indicate. And we didn't want to come up to you at your desk and ask those kinds of questions or do anything. You know how up there people can see what's going on if you go into an interview room or people are in there getting supplies. Okay. So we wanted to afford you some privacy, some confidentiality to talk about this because we thought it might be, something, you're married to someone else, obviously, and so forth, and that you may not want to, talk about these things in that setting where someone, we don't want the rumor mill or gossip or any of that kind of stuff to start.
That's fine. I mean.
So we did this just as a means to try and speak to you in just a confidential place where where your business isn't out there for other people and your division to know about.
God, that's been a million years ago. I mean, what year is it now? 2009? I mean, I graduated in 82. 82, yeah. We dated. I dated other guys. I'm sure he dated other girls.
Well, let me ask you, roughly how long would you say you guys dated?
Oh, jeez. I couldn't even say. I mean.
Just between you and John.
It was kind of a weird relationship. I mean, we dated. I can't say that he was my boyfriend. I don't know that he would consider me his girlfriend. We dated. We did things. I played sports in college. He played basketball. His brother played basketball. It just didn't work out. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It was like I went out with other guys, saw other guys. I went on lots of vacations.
And once you guys split, were you guys still friends or kind of,
I mean,
is it friendly, not friendly?
No, I don't think it was not friendly. I mean, we were friendly.
Did you ever met his wife?
I may have.
Do you remember her name or anything, or? Or what she did for a living, or where she worked, or anything about her?
Well, I think I'm going to say that I think she was a nurse. I mean, I can't remember how he said he met her. I mean, it's been so long ago.
Well, let me ask you, did you go to their wedding,
No, I didn't go to their wedding. No, did not go to their wedding. I couldn't even tell you what year he got married. I mean, it's been a million years ago. Again, I don't understand why you're talking about some guy I dated a million years ago.
Well, do you know what happened to his wife?
Yeah, I know she got killed.
When they asked Stephanie about Sherri's murder, she would say she found out about it by seeing a poster around the station when she was on patrol. She also said she'd spoken with John about it.
Detectives did what they could at that time on the crime scene, okay? And the burglary thing you're talking about, that is an angle that they looked at. But now we're looking at everything else on the case. Because nobody was ever arrested on the case.
I don't know that or not.
Okay. Now, what we'd like to do is, obviously you know about all the DNA stuff and things of the nature that, gets done on cases nowadays. If we asked you for a DNA swab, would you be willing to give us one?
Maybe. Because now I'm thinking I probably need to talk to a lawyer.
Okay.
I mean,
well,
because I know how this stuff works, okay? Don't get me wrong. You're right. I have been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And I wish I had been recording this because now it sounds like, there's, you're telling these people say I'm fighting with her, and now it sounds like you're trying to, I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, we know.
Okay? And now it almost sounds like you're trying to pin something on me.
No,
now I got that sense.
Well, what it gets to on these cases, and you know it as well as I do, our job is to identify and eliminate suspects.
I can't believe this.
So if we ask you to the point to give us a DNA sample, a buccal swab, so we can identify or eliminate you, would you be willing to do that?
Maybe. Because I know this.
Well, that's where we're at too. I mean, because right now, from looking at the evidence, it's it's possible we may have some DNA at the location.
That's great.
And we're going to do what we can to try to put this thing together. And your name's in the book. These people are pointing at you for whatever reason.
I don't know why. That's just crazy. I mean, that's absolutely crazy.
And it would be irresponsible on our part not to look at it.
I know. You guys have to do your job. And I guess I'm going to have to contact somebody. So.
That's fair.
I mean, because I know how this stuff works. I mean, I just can't believe it.
I mean, we understand that. I mean, if we were in your position, I mean, we would feel the same way.
I just can't even believe it. I mean, it's just, I'm shocked. I'm really shocked that somebody would be saying that I did this. I mean, we had a fight, and so I went and killed her. I mean, come on.
On December 18th, 2009, Stephanie Lazarus was charged with the first-degree murder of Sherri Rasmussen. She would plead not guilty. Connie says the arrest was a long time coming.
So we kind of knew that they were going to make an arrest, so we were all huddled over at my mom's, waiting for the call. And then when they called us and told us, obviously we cried. But I was happy for my dad, that he's finally getting verification that he was right from the very beginning.
During the trial, it was revealed that John Rutten and Stephanie Lazarus met in college in the late 70s. They casually dated. After graduation between 1981 and 1984, they continued to date and were sexually intimate. But John would never consider Stephanie his girlfriend. Stephanie attended the police academy in 1983 and graduated in 1984. An officer who attended the academy with Stephanie would later describe her as, quote, the strongest, most aggressive, most persistent fighter of the women in the class. In 1986, Stephanie Lazarus was an LAPD police officer. A fellow officer who was also her friend and former roommate would describe her fitness level as outstanding. As far as strength, he would say that when compared to other women, she was superior, and that she was an expert-level shooter. He would also recall that sometime in 1985 through 1987, Stephanie had shown her friend and another police officer that she had lock-picking tools and she knew how to use them. In June of 1984, while still casually dating Stephanie, John had met Sherri, and in May of 1985, they became engaged. Apparently, when Stephanie found out that John and Sherri were engaged to be married, she called him, desperate. She begged him to come over to her place, which he did. And when he arrived, Stephanie was beside herself. In between tears, she told him that she was in love with him, asking him repeatedly to have sex with her, which he did. However, the sexual encounter they shared didn't change John's relationship status with Sherri. They were engaged to be married, and several weeks later, he moved into Sherri's condo. Sometime after this, Stephanie allegedly showed up at Sherri's work, angry, upset, and ready to get even. She told Sherri that she and John had been intimate. Remember, she allegedly made that comment, "If I can't have John, no one will." Distraught, Sherri came home from work and confronted John, who confessed to having had sex with Stephanie after they were engaged. John promised to not have any contact with Stephanie, and the couple moved forward in their relationship, marrying in November of 1985. But Stephanie wasn't ready to move on. Not by a long shot. Stephanie's roommate would testify that after she learned about the engagement, she'd gone into his room, woken him up late at night. She was looking for comfort. She would explain that John had broken up with her and was going to marry someone else. She revealed that she'd gone to his fiancé's work and confronted her, lamenting that she couldn't date because she was picky and only wanted men who were tall and athletic like John. Stephanie wasn't working on the day that Sherri was murdered. Less than 2 weeks after Sherri's murder, Stephanie Lazarus would report to the Santa Monica Police Department that her Smith & Wesson service weapon was stolen from the glove compartment of her car while it was parked in Santa Monica. The gun that she had reported as being stolen has never been found. Stephanie didn't contact John after Sherri's murder, but 3 years later in 1989, they met up in Hawaii. Apparently, they were both on vacation with other people, and they had sexual relations, but they never became involved in a relationship. Stephanie would be found guilty of first-degree murder.
People of the state of California versus Stephanie Eileen Lazarus. Case number BA 357423. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Stephanie Eileen Lazarus, guilty of the crime of murder of Sherri Rasmussen in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony, as charged in count 1 of the information. We further find the murder was of the first degree.
Sherri's former husband, John Rutten, gave an impact statement before Stephanie's sentencing.
Your Honor, I'm John Rutten. There are really no words that can describe the loss of Sherri and the whole of this experience, so it makes no sense to talk very long. It suffices to say that the Rasmussen family, my family, and Stephanie's family have been thrust into a bizarre world of disbelief and indescribable sadness. Sherri Rasmussen had a profound impact on so many people, and I was proud that she agreed to be my wife. It was impossible not to notice Sherri when she entered a room. To me, her physical presence was startling. I can clearly remember the first moment I laid eyes on her. Sherri Rasmussen was a physical presence, and my heart still races when I look at pictures of her. But Sherri was extraordinary, more for who she was than the way she looked. She was a hard worker, a consummate professional, a leader, a diplomat, forgiving, tough, and a kid at heart. Sherri's loss, the way she died, and the trial 25 years after her death has had a profound impact on many, many others. The effects are broad and span a generation, creating pain for those whose lives should have never been touched by this tragic event. Again, words are feeble tools for describing these impacts, but there are so many moments and so very many tears. And the fact that Sherri's death occurred because she met and married me brings me to my knees.
Stephanie Lazarus was sentenced to 27 years to life in 2009. Long-awaited justice for Sherri and her family. Despite being sentenced to 27 years, the family found out that Stephanie Lazarus is coming up for parole in November of 2023.
I guess with the parole hearing coming up, is Stephanie had 23 years of her life free after she killed my sister. And then she serves 12, 13 years and then potentially has an opportunity to continue to live her life. I mean, it's really not fair. I mean, my sister was just starting to embark on, with her marriage. She was still early in her professional career. She had so much more that she could have contributed. We don't know how far what she could have done. And certainly, she didn't have the opportunity to have kids. Stephanie was able to adopt a daughter. The different stages of life she eliminated and took away from Sherri, but also for the rest of us to share with her as she goes the stages of life. She took that from my parents. And all honesty, I believe that my parents' life was cut short as a result of it. Because their family lived into their 90s, and both of my parents died in their 80s.
The Murder Chronicles is a pie-in-the-sky production recorded live in the beautiful Pacific Northwest. We are produced by Brandon Morgan and myself, music by Soundstripe. For Pie in the Sky Media, I'm Carolyn Osorio, your writer and host. Thanks for listening.